23rd, 2019 to order. Do we have any additions to the agenda? I need a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
I'll second.
We're doing a lot of that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the minutes of the March 14th, 2019 regular meeting and special meetings of March 4th and April 9th, 2019.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion during approval of minutes?
Yeah.
Good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Consent agenda is 3.1 through 3.7, so I'll need a motion for the entire thing. It includes the treasurer's report, financial report, consideration of claims, the transportation report, cafeteria report. We will include the motion to approve the participation in the RIC bids with non-general fund dollars during the 1920 school year as recommended by the business manager and superintendent. And it will also include the motion to approve the participation for specific services on the Madison Oneida BOCES final services and commitment form for 1920 school year as recommended by the business manager and superintendent. Can I have a motion for 3.1 through 3.7?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion on those items? All those in favor?
Aye.
We have no business. So the first participation we have are for summer curriculum projects. We've got Victoria Sager, Vicki Motes, Emily Freeth, and Bridget Cook for global curriculum updates. Bridget Cook and Sarah Zosky for 12-1-1 classroom planning, and Monica Chamberlain and Jamie Bordway for Google Classroom. We'll move, and you guys come down, have it order you look here.
The remote's right there, Mickey.
Okay.
I tried to get your people.
Yeah, you did.
Red button?
What?
So welcome. My name is Victoria Seeger. I teach Global 9 and 10. Vicki Motes cannot be here tonight. She's at home sick. But she teaches special education.
I'm Emily Freeth. I teach 7th and 8th grade social studies.
And I'm Bridget Cook. I teach special education, including Constructive.
All right. So some of the changes that have been made to the Regents exam, Global 10, in the past few years. So in 2007, the content was both from Global 9 and Global 10. There's 3 parts. So part 1 was 50 multiple choice questions. Part 2, thematic essay. Part 3 was both a short answer or the scaffolding questions, and then we had the document-based or the DBQ. Last year was the transition exam. So we chose to do the transition exam last year. Some of the different things is it's only Global 10 content. So that's a big, big change.
Sorry.
That's okay. So part 1, they narrowed it down to 30 multiple choice questions. Part 2 is still the same thematic, and part 3 was still the same short answer, scaffolding, and then DBQ. This year coming up is another big change. So this is 28 stimulus-based multiple choice questions. And we're going to talk about that more later, what that means by stimulus-based. And then part 2 is the constructive response questions. We're going to also talk about that later. And then part 3 is now an enduring issues essay or question. There's no longer the DBQ, and there's no longer a thematic essay. So the whole test has changed. So this summer, when we got together and we started thinking about how can we get students prepared starting in middle school to take this exam in 10th grade, we thought of several different questions. So what are the historical thinking skills and how can we implement them starting in 7th grade? And these can also transition all the way through 11th and 12th grade as well. 2, how can we adapt our formative assessments to align with the new global regions and the social studies framework? And 3, how can we not only align 7th and 12th grade skills, but work to grow and expand those skills each year? So building on from 7th grade all the way through 10th grade, and then those skills will hopefully carry on through 11th and 12th grade. And additionally, those skills they can take to other classes as well. So English, other classes that require these different skills. And we'll talk about what those skills exactly are next. So, some of the historical thinking skills. So some of these skills we hoped, we assumed a lot of the kids have heard of the words or have practiced in other classes, social studies, English, general, other classes. So some of the skills that we talked about, reliability, so determining based on how useful this information is in the source for its purpose. So if you're given a document, you're trying to look at who is the source from, and based off who wrote the source, how reliable is that source actually going to be. We talked about historical context, cause, effect, geographic context, which is another one that students may not have heard about. That's really important, you'll see later, for the constructive response essay or questions. We also talked about similarity, difference, point of view, and audience. So the audience is who is reading the document. What is the purpose of that? So some of the questions we ask students are, why does this document exist? Who is the author thinking about would receive this document? And maybe that changed the way they wrote the document based off who their audience was. We also talked about turning point. So major event, idea, or historical development that brings about a change, what that change is and why that change occurred. We talked about bias. So we looked at a lot of authors of documents and what kind of bias might they have and how would that impact the reliability of the documents for the audience. They all interconnect. We also talked about who the intended audience is for. So a lot of students would say, it's for me, I'm reading it. Well, who at that time was it intended for? There's a difference. We talked about purpose. So why was this document actually produced? Not for you, a 10th grader, to read, but at that time, why was it actually produced? What is the purpose or the intent of the document?
All right, my turn. So what does this look like in middle school, especially for 7th and 8th grade students? With this being a change in the curriculum, we decided that how I fit into this equation with these middle school students would be to have this be the course of study right off the bat at the beginning of the year with 7th and 8th grade. So we began our school year with this essential question: how do historians determine what happened in the past? And this is a question that we repeatedly come back to based on all the different things that we're studying. And so to begin the lesson, and I think you were given some of our examples, I started off the unit with just some very basic vocabulary work regarding these words. What is history? Historian, source, document. These are words that students may hear of, but not necessarily have a true basis of their meaning or how they apply to the course of social studies or the study of history. So as the unit moves on of our historical thinking skills, they're provided with a very unique scenario based on a lunchroom altercation or a fight. This is to give them some practice into understanding point of view, bias, sourcing, corroboration as the story unfolds, and students really do get into it because they can kind of relate to it. It's something that could potentially happen or they could witness or see in their own life. So if you look at the examples in your document, you can see how they play together. So as the lunchroom scenario becomes more in depth and it develops, we are able to apply these analytical techniques as corroboration, contextualization, sourcing, as you can see with examples 3 through 7. And as we continue through this unit of understanding and learning these historical thinking skills, we go back to these kind of main bullet point questions. What is history? How does point of view affect it? Well, what sources do historians use to learn about the past? How do you determine if a source is reliable? How do historians corroborate their sources? That is a really important one, especially in this day and age where students are believing like the first thing that they read on the internet, but we need to, as historians, look at various sources and sites to make sure that things are aligning and they're making sense. And then lastly, once we get through this unit, they have this basic skill set that can be applied as we go on through the course of the school year. And they're able to take these historical thinking skills and apply them to other things that we do in the class. Specifically like looking at political cartoons, primary sources, and they're able to kind of pull these skills together to make sense of what they're looking at to see how historians construct the past.
One of the major shifts in the test for this year is to stimulus-based multiple choice questions, which there's 28 of them. So by stimulus-based, students need to answer the question based on a map or a text or a quotation, images. Every single question is related to almost a mini document itself. So instead of students being asked something like, who was the author of the Communist Manifesto, just basic recall level, they have to discern information from another piece or a document. Okay, they'd be asked to, what are the main ideas of Karl Marx based on these quotations from the Communist Manifesto. So that's a big shift from students just kind of rote learning facts to really having a holistic understanding of history and how to gain information, things about the time period, things about the context, to draw more conclusions. Okay, so a little bit more difficult and definitely relying on those skills that Emily's starting to teach in those.
Next, we have the constructive response question. So this is replacing the DBQ scaffolding question. And what the state has given them on their regions is two different sets of two different documents. So the documents can be, they can be text, they can be images, they can be maps. It does not matter, but the state is giving them two sets of two different documents. And the questions that they ask are using those historical thinking skills. So looking at the historical geographic context, sourcing, bias, reliability, cause and effect, or comparison. So I think they have an example. Okay, so here's one example of the Mongol Empire. So they give them a map. On every test, they do define the historical thinking skill on the test, which is nice for the students. So if they're asking, explain the historical circumstances that led to expansion of the Mongol Empire, they will always have the definition of that historical thinking skill on the test for the students, which is really, really nice. So they define it. So it refers to historical circumstances that led to this event, idea, historical development. We just have to teach the kids how to then use that skill. So the question number one on using the first document is either historical or geographic context. There are always going to be one of those two questions using document one. Using document two is always going to be about sourcing. So point of view, bias, the use of reliability, they just cut it out a few weeks ago. Purpose, audience, and question three is always going to be using the same two documents and then comparing those two documents in some way. So what is the turning point that led from document 1 to 2, document 2 to 1, or what is the relationship between either one, or similarity or difference? So that is always going to be the same setup. The last part of the exam is the enduring issue. So this essentially is replacing the DBQ and the thematic portion of the exam. So what it is the students are giving a set of 5 documents. The 5 documents can either be text or images. There needs to be one image or a picture that the state includes, but the rest of the 4 can be text. So the students, given all the documents, are all from different time periods within the Global 10 content. And what they have to do is examine the documents and they have to identify an enduring issue. So an enduring issue is a challenge or a problem that is debated across time, across societies. They have to identify one enduring issue only. They then have to explain what that enduring issue is, why it's significant. We have to do that using at least 3 of the documents. So we are teaching them now how to identify those enduring issues. So some of the enduring issues include impact of cooperation, conflict, impact of cultural diffusion, population growth, impact of imperialism, And the list goes on and on and on. So the state has not, they have told us that the list is, it can go on and on and on. There's no definite list. We have created a definite list though that we think is going to help the students. So we've been practicing these enduring issues in Ms. Free's 7th grade class. So we have the exact, this summer, one of the things we did was we made the exact same posters that we put in both of our classrooms. So the students start seeing these enduring issues and the historical thinking skills in 7th grade, and they carry it with them, and I know it's in Mr. Sidorn's room, it's in a lot of rooms, so they see these different enduring issues and they
Just become second nature.
yeah. Like they can, we'll give them a document and say, what's an enduring issue in here? And they can identify the enduring issue. And they have to talk about how it's changed or stayed the same over time. So that's how they use those enduring issues. I think that's it. Any questions?
I don't have a question,
Yes.
but I'm really happy to see that the thinking skills in global and American history and the approach in the Regents and AP are all coming together so that you can start, if not in 7th or even lower, but they're getting their act together, so it's great that you guys have your act together.
Yeah, it's not like the basic plug and chug anymore. Like memorize things. Now it's about the skills, which is really nice because we can develop them in 7th grade.
I'd like to see that there's, this low level, there's a lot of good structure for them, like the test showing, this is the skill you're using, remember this, and giving you that. Obviously, the goal is to get them to be doing this without a lot of structure, right? So applying it to their own lives. So I guess not too much. One is, what kind of things are you doing to help them kind of get to that? Even though it's not part of the test, kind of like foreshadowing maybe what they hopefully will be seeing later. And then also, with this list, this great list you have of these enduring issues, helping them make sure that like this is not the only list, like this is just some of many.
I know in my class for enduring issues, there's like the whole list of all, but students will say, can I use this one? I say, well, does it fit? So we go through, does it fit? And if it does, then they can use it. So there are a lot of, and there's a lot of different variations. So we talk about impact of cultural diffusion, but other students say, well, cultural diffusion, it can be through trade. So impact of trade could be a different one that they could add on. So they can adjust that. And with the other historical thinking skills, so they use those in English. So talking about bias, point of view. So we bring those in other ways. And we also do a lot of, I know in my class, do nows. So they come in, they're asked a question every day on the front of the board, and they can practice that through the do nows.
One of the activities we used earlier this year was they had to identify an enduring issue in the document we gave them, and then they had to think about how that related to something in their current life. It could be their local community, it could be their school community, or even the larger world, just to kind of let them see it's not just on the test, it's in our lives. That's why it's an enduring issue. That's what we mean by enduring issue.
And with the 7th and 8th grade, I put a lot of emphasis on what is thrown at them, like through social media and television, and talking about point of view and perspective and intended audience, so they can kind of become well-versed with everything that they are bombarded with on a daily basis, just, outside of these 4 walls.
Yeah. I've enjoyed seeing the Will Bring Home the political cartoons. But
A lot of political cartoons.
But I think that's great because it's showing that, like things that you think are just simple and benign, right? A meme on the internet could have a much more larger impact in society, and so you should be aware that you're not just consuming things without thinking about them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alright, so I also worked this summer with Sarah Zogby on the 12-1 curriculum. I was the 12-1 teacher for 4 years, I believe, and then Ms. Zogby has taken that over this year. So we spent some time this summer working together to share things that I found successful in my classroom that she could transfer into her classroom and enhance and make an even better experience for our students. So some of our goals for our 3 hours we spent this summer, just kind of determine a framework for the upcoming school year. The 12-in-1 class in the middle school is 3 grade levels. So deciding how to group students, which standards are going to be addressed, and when they will be addressed and how they will be addressed in the curriculum. Identifying current weaknesses or missing pieces in units, and brainstorming ways to enhance those units of study and make them better. Selecting instructional programs to meet the needs of the students, and to share teaching strategies to provide specially designed instruction to the group of students with diverse needs. So what we accomplished, we spent some time organizing the SRA corrective reading program, which Sarah uses in conjunction with Gillingham strategies in the 12-in-1 reading class. Determining a sequence for units of study in social studies and science. You kind of have to operate on a 3-year plan, having a multi-grade level multi-grade level classroom to ensure all standards are being addressed for students. I did a little training on Saxon math for me, how I've used it in the classroom and how it could be used in the future. And we selected a novel for the first unit of study in ELA and discussed how to differentiate that.
So the results, exactly. I will say the hardest part was figuring out how to kind of figure out each year what you're going to do, especially for that science and social studies. It's very tricky depending on the kids you have coming up. And oftentimes, which goes with this part, you have kids that can come in different grades. They don't always start with me in 6th grade and you get them in different grades. So that was probably the most interesting thing for me. But that being said, realistically, the results were I took everything we did, executed it, and then tried to build off of it, which is exactly what number 1 kind of says. Good example was we did EDU boxes. Actually, Mrs. Cook was able to, the EDU breakout boxes, and Mrs. Walker was also able to see that too. We did it in math, which was really nice because it incorporated, as you pointed out, like reading along with word problems along with what they had to do in math. So taking things she had in the curriculum and trying to build off of pieces that we've also bought this year. We had a, what do you call it, like a subscription or something to it, but they're great. I did that as well for social studies. It didn't go as well. I learned from that, which is why today went a little better. But those are things that I tried to kind of put in from based on the curriculum and the pieces and the standards that Ms. Cook was able to share with me and build off that. I have a very active group this year, so it is a lot of thinking on your toes and revamping. Working with other general education teachers, and not to point out with some in this room have worked very hard with me trying to collaborate. Teaching writing, I want to say it hasn't been, not to say my strength, but it's been a challenge. So I've been working really hard with Mrs. Corbett, actually has been really patient with me, trying to make sure, giving me all the pieces I need, very patient, and allowing me to borrow a lot of her things as well. I think I've kind of hit all that. I think the biggest piece, though, is that you have to look at it every single year. And I learned, I know you say that, but you don't know it until all of a sudden you're in there. And it really is just so different every year. And you just have to redevelop it, just recheck it and see what you're doing and change everything. It's interesting. It's very hard to almost describe in words, I'll be very honest. It'll pop in someday. But it is something you have to look at every single year.
Yeah, thank you for the time. We have a lot of, I think, experts in our building. And so we have those blocks of solid time to work together to share something I know works with her that she can implement, and then adjust to the kinesthetic approach that she needed to talk for her students. It was really valuable. I think it's great that we have a strong faculty that we can rely on as experts in their own fields.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Any questions?
You know, that 3 hours.
Yes. Definitely not more than 3 hours. No, we're always doing stuff. You know how that goes. But yes, but this student lent me 3 hours of her. Yes, she lent me at least 3 hours of her time getting me ready for this. So I'm sure much more. And her door is always open. She's made that clear. Always open, but I have a certain number of hours I can ask for. Thank you, guys.
So we're together, but we're also separate. We did Google Classroom, but we obviously did it in our own classrooms. So we kind of each have a presentation based on how we used it. So I'll just kind of step over here while she's.
You're already there, Jim.
Oh, yeah, there I am. See all this pressure of using a computer in front of everyone.
Click sign.
What?
Sign in.
Yeah. This is not a Mac. It's giving me, it's throwing me off a little bit. I gotta remember my password in front of everybody?
That's easy.
Oh, it's because she's still signed in. So go back and sign out.
Do you want your?
Vicky's still
I'll
signed
go.
out.
They don't follow the rules.
Yeah, they didn't sign out properly. So close that tab.
I'll go sign out.
No, no, no,
You
no.
know my
You-
computer
go
or-
to the- Click on the B.
I think we should go to classroom.
Click on the B. Now go down and sign out. Apple Q.
There we go.
Just making sure you're
I
going
get 2 tries.
Yeah, right. Based on the tempo.
It's a good start to the classroom.
Yeah.
Good start to our technology.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe the dots with the square dots will top next to your name.
Yeah. So you can see how many times, and that's actually how I wanted to start this, I started this and started over a few different times because there's so much for me to say. And then so I really wanted to, I started out by thinking about, I want to show you all the things my kids did. And so that was, and no, that's not the point. And so then I, tried to just do a general or a comparison of other technologies. And so that didn't work, so I started over again. So this really is just a snapshot of how Google Classroom impacted me and my teaching. Because this was, of all of the summer projects that we've done, or I should say I've done, and there's been plenty. This was the one that I found to be the most rewarding because it has impacted me, I think, the most as a teacher and how efficient I am in the classroom. I did an emoji, or my emoji for you, Gary. I was wondering if you had one. No? Okay, so the best part, I think, for me about the Google Classroom and Google in general is that you can work anywhere, anytime, from any device. And so that being said, you could be home sick, yourself sick, a sick child, you could be anywhere. You could log in through your phone, you could log in through a computer, and it's all at your fingertips. And so that not only goes for students, but also for the teachers. And so one of the ways that I thought that Google Classroom instantly was easy was that everything we did connected through Google. And so it seemed overwhelming at first, but it's like, oh, wait a second, everything I have is in Google. That's a document. Oh, I have that form. Oh, I have that PowerPoint. And so creating documents and using existing documents was something that was incredibly easy to integrate. And then there's that other part where students' work never gets lost. Oh, I didn't do it, I lost it. No, it's there, trust me. And so not only is it easy to create assignments, but the process of turning in assignments, the process of managing student assignments, this took a little bit of getting used to because it's different. But once I got the hang of it, it was so easy. And so one tip that I think Chris gave me and then I had heard other teachers were doing was to have students take a picture of their assignments when they would turn it in. If you're familiar at all with Google Classroom, you can hit submit or you can turn things in without actually turning it in. And so when an alert kind of came to you that you were missing an assignment, If it was something that was done through like a piece of paper, then you could easily just hit submit and the assignment would be missing. So actually having the kids physically sit down and take a picture of the assignment as they turned it in not only helped me, but it helped them, especially if the paper got lost in transition. It's like, oh, nope, there it is, we can look at it. So just managing student work, managing my own work was something that I really loved. And as you can see, the picture here on the right is of all of my classrooms. And so I actually created one when we started the Heart and Soul group, and truly within 5 minutes, creating the group, adding the students, the kids were in, they were posting, the guardians were there because the students were already in Google Classroom, and so it makes the work so much easier. And I think the other thing too is that students now get the ownership of their work. When it's in Google Classroom, it's there for them at any time. And so they always have access to documents, so there's no, I lost this or can I have another copy, because it's there. This is another really big one for me, was how I was able to differentiate and manage progress in real time. So as you can see on the right-hand side of my screen here, these are students' work, they were essays. And so what I was able to do was to watch students as they were working on their essays over the period of a long period of time. I was able to give them real feedback as they were working, using the comment feature. And so it was also really interesting because the differentiation piece and the privacy piece is really big. So I could have students in my room that might require an organizer, or they might require something a little bit different than what the entire assignment is. So I could create one assignment, I could push it to certain students. I could create another assignment that maybe has a slight modification to it, push it to another group of students. I could push it to another group of students where they have the actual organizer, and the only people who know are the students receiving the document. So being able to differentiate in real time is something that was really, really, really great for me. And for the students too. I think just monitoring students as they're working. I love Google Forms. If you haven't tried Google Forms to do just like simple little check-in things, it's like my new favorite thing. Super easy to do, kids get instant feedback. And so that was one of the things, and it's right in Google, and it's right in your suite. You probably never even use it. So I think one of the things that was really hard at the beginning was that nothing's ever perfect, right? So having used other technologies for so long, having an open mind moving forward was a challenge. So I just went through, because Google listens to teachers, and so there were so many. I know Monica is also part of a couple of Facebook groups where teachers were kind of complaining, not complaining, but were adjusting to some of the changes with the new class.